Hi, welcome to high school literature, where all we do is nothing but discuss everything about literature from the perspective of students in secondary school or in high school. In the last season, we looked at quite a number of things. We began by laying a foundation for what is known as literature. We gave different definitions to literature as a concept and as a subject. Then we went a step further to looking at some of the major elements that you find prevalent in works of literature. And some of these elements actually included plot, character, setting, and theme. We looked at these four. And then we went on a step further to looking at each literary genre, that is poetry, prose, and drama, and what actually made them unique and stand out from the others. And then we concluded that season by looking at literary devices, where we looked at quite a number of very common literary devices that you find embedded in works of literature. I did mention in that video that I would return with a second installment, as 1, 2, 3 videos will be grossly insufficient to cater to the entire gamut of literary devices that you have in literature. This video is a fulfillment of that promise. And if you are new to this channel, my name is Olabode Ajayi. Please stick around as I go on this short break. So let's start with the paradox. The paradox is actually a statement that appears to contradict itself. However, on closer examination, we observe that the paradox is a statement that actually holds deeper truths. So on the surface level, it appears contradictory, but on a deeper introspection, we find out that the paradox actually makes sense in itself. I will give you a very good example. The more things change, the more they remain the same. That is a paradox. So it appears as if things are changing, but they are still staying the same. I mean, it's like, let's apply this to politics. We have different governments, different regimes, different rulers or leaders that come into power, each one promising a better life to its people than the previous administration. But then eventually what happens after they have served out their tenure, we realize that they were not actually better than the previous regime. I mean, look at Animal Farm, for example. The pigs came out promising everything. At the end of the novella, we realize that the animals took a good look at the pigs, and then they took a good look at the human beings, and they could not find any difference between both of them. So the more things change, the more they remain the same. Another example of a paradox would be attack is the best form of defense. Now, attack is the best form of defense. How does that make sense really? Well, it does make sense if you're a lover of football and you realize that your club side manager decides to go on the offensive. He mounts pressure on the opposing side as a way of ensuring that his own side does not concede a goal. So attack is actually the best form of defense. Another would be, if you want peace, prepare for war. Now, how does that make sense really? How does going out for war ensure peace? Well, it does if you look at it in a sense. If you are surrounded by some very unfriendly neighbors and you know you have what it takes to take them all out, then go ahead and take them all out, because it is only in their defeat that your own peace can be assured. So if you want peace, prepare for war. Number 2, the pathetic fallacy. Now, the pathetic fallacy is a literary device that looks very much like personification. However, the pathetic fallacy, unlike personification, transfers human emotions to nature. So emotions of love, of hatred, of anger, of rage, of cruelty are transferred to nature. When this happens, then the device that has been employed there is not personification. Please take note, it is actually pathetic fallacy. Let's cast our mind back to Kofi Awoonor's poem, The Sea Eats the Land at Home. In that poem, the sea is described as cruel, the cruel sea, the angry sea, the raging sea. These are actually human attributes used in describing the sea in Kofi Awoonor's poem. The Litotes is actually a literary device where a negation or double negation is used to express something positive. So you are trying to achieve positivity by using negativity or negatives. So a negative or two negatives are brought together to achieve something positive. It's more like what you have in mathematics. Negative times negative equals positive. That is litotes in a nutshell. Good examples of litotes, you have something like, I am not unavailable. Not is a negation. Unavailable is a negation of available. So when you bring both of them together, it simply means I am not unavailable. And that simply means what? I am available. You are not incorrect simply means you are correct. One of the sayings of Jesus Christ, he said, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town. That simply means a prophet has honor everywhere else apart from his own place. That is litotes. Negatives actually tend to achieve or point in the direction of something positive. Let's go on, shall we? This time I'll be looking at sarcasm. Now, sarcasm is actually a caustic statement. It's a caustic statement that seeks to mock and ridicule a person's level of intelligence. The essence of sarcasm is to mock someone, to ridicule their level of thinking or intelligence. That is the whole idea of sarcasm. Some have come to describe sarcasm as a kind of verbal irony. Yes, I quite agree with that. But beyond just being a form of verbal irony, sarcasm is not just what is said, but also how it is said and the tone with which it is also communicated. So sarcasm is what is said plus how it is said plus the tone in which it is said. I mean, we have a lot of examples around and about us. I mean, if someone comes to the class and says, look, I'm the most intelligent person in this class, and then someone coughs at that point in time, okay, that cough might actually be a sarcastic response to the person's statement, because perhaps this person has failed all the exams he had ever written, and he comes to class and says, I'm the most intelligent person in this class. Then someone coughs. That is actually a sarcastic response. Now, I'll give an example in a film I'd watched, the Avengers film Black Widow 2021. There was a scene there between Melina and Alexei. Now, both of them are supposed to be a couple. When both of them meet themselves, Melina actually has a pig, and then she calls the pig by name. She calls the pig Alexei. Alexei. And then the pig responds, Alexei himself responds. And the man is shocked. He looks at the wife and says, you named a pig after me? And the wife says, yes. Don't you see the semblance? Now, that was actually a sarcastic response, because the pig was actually very fat, and Alexei on the other on his own part is also on the big side. So they share that in common, and the wife tells him, you should have seen the semblance by now if I named the pig after you. Okay, that is a sarcastic response. Now, African mothers actually use sarcasm a lot. I mean, they tell you something, but they want you to use your initiative. I mean, take for example, your mom looks at you and tells you, get rid of these plates. And then you ask your mom, where should I put the plate? And she said, put it on my head. You will be a very special child to go and put the plate on your mother's head. You will not be you won't carry that smile on your face, because she's going to give you a serious spanking. Let's look at symbols. Now, symbolism. A symbol is actually a person, a thing or object, or even a situation that actually stands for any other thing else apart from itself. That is a symbol. So when we say something is symbolic, it means it is representing something else apart from itself. So we take our eyes and our focus, our attention away from the source situation, and we try to find some form of interpretation for it. That is the whole idea of a symbol. So a symbol is a person, a thing, an object, an idea that represents or stands for something else apart from itself. So sometimes it's actually something concrete that has an abstract representation. That is a symbol. Now, let's look at some animals. The lion, for example, is taken as a symbol of royalty, of courage, of strength, and of bravery. The dove is a bird that represents peace. So whenever the dove is being shown or flown around, it is a symbol of peace, and so on and so forth. Let's look at colors. The color white is the color of purity. So when someone wants to show that he is pure and all of that, they put on white. or they represent that by the white color. So red actually is an ambivalent color. I mean, it's a color of rage, anger, emotional instability, blood, and so on and so forth. Red is also the color of love. Now, one of the things that we need to take cognizance of is the fact that whatever has been used as a symbol can actually be culture specific. So that it means one thing in one culture does not mean that in another culture it will have the same representation. No. So you'll have to be very, very careful when you are applying symbols in your work of literature. Now, Animal Farm is a work that has a heavy sustenance of symbols right from the very beginning to the end. I mean, in Animal Farm, you had the pigs, you had the other animals, you had Mr. Jones and his men, and so on and so forth. Even the farm was symbolic. Now, Animal Farm is a piece of literature that actually mirrors the Russian Revolution. So, Mr. Jones, the pigs, and every other animal on the farm were actually symbolic and representative of the events that actually culminated in the Russian Revolution. The pigs in Animal Farm were meant to represent the elite, the people that ascribed every privilege in society to themselves. Boxer is a representative of the common man who believed in his leader and was willing to do virtually anything to ensure that the dream stayed alive, and so on and so forth. In Holes by Louis Saka, we also had symbols there. I mean, this yellow spotted lizard, the scorpion, and the rattlesnakes are actually symbolic of death. So anyone unfortunate enough to have been beaten by any of these or stung by any of these, was given the day off because they knew that they were not going to survive it. And then it's also worthy of note that between chapter 1 and chapter 2, the warden was also classified as a very, very dangerous creature. Okay? That simply tells us that she's symbolic of everything evil. Please take note of that. Another example would be William Golding's The Lord of the Flies. Now, this book is a very, very beautiful piece. Many students don't like it, but it's a fantastic piece of artistry. Now, you had different characters in this book. You had Ralph, Jack, Piggy, Simon, Roger, and so on and so forth. All of them are actually symbolic. Let's start with Jack. Jack symbolizes every leader who is tyrannical, autocratic, dictatorial, and despotic, who will stop at nothing until they have been able to subdue every dissenting voice. That is Jack for you. Piggy is symbolic of that cerebral person, the person with the high IQ who is able to think on his feet, and so on and so forth. Piggy is also the custodian of law and order. The conch shell is symbolic of law and order. Whoever had the conch shell had the right to speak. Ralph, the golden boy Ralph, is representative of a democratically elected leader. Everyone loves the leader because they voted for him. Whether he's able to live up to expectation or not is a different issue entirely. Okay, so these are actually all symbols that you find in this work of literature. Even Piggy's glasses. Piggy's glasses are also symbolic. Many have said that Piggy's glasses represents intelligence. I beg to disagree. How does a pair of glasses represent intelligence? The glasses mean nothing in themselves. But if you were to tell me that the glasses actually are symbolic of power, I would agree with you. Because if they held no meaning at all, why would Jack go all the way out to ensure that he held the glasses or the broken piece of glasses in his hand? It was because at that point in time, they had ceased for him to be the source or the means by which Piggy could see. They had become the means by which you determine who was in charge or in control of that island. Okay? So every work that you get to read actually hides some form of symbols in them. It's your duty to go looking out for these symbols and tell us what they mean. Let's go on, shall we? Okay, so let's talk about repetition. Now, repetition actually means a word occurs or features more than once. It could be a word, it could be a phrase, it could be, just a group of words. Now, let's look at some types of repetition. You have about 2 types or thereabouts. You have the one known as the anaphora, and then you have the epiphora or epistrophe. Now, the anaphora is the repetition of words or phrases at the beginning of a line or at the beginning of a sentence. I mean, you have a lot of examples around and about us. One of them would be, I came, I saw, I conquered. That is repetition, the repetition of I. Now, I came, I saw, I conquered. That's it. Another would be this famous speech given by Martin Luther King Jr., where he says, I have a dream. So he kept on repeating the words, I have a dream, I have a dream, I have a dream. I mean, he said, I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream. And it keeps on going over and over and over again. So that is anaphora, an example, a very good example of the anaphora. Now, the epiphora or the epistrophe is the repetition of words at the end of a line or at the end of a sentence or a clause, thereabout. That is epiphora or epistrophe. A very good example would be Abraham Lincoln's speech. He says, democracy is the government of the people, for the people, and by the people. That is an example of epiphora. So, the repetition of the people at the end. Now, what's the whole idea for repetition? Whenever words are repeated, they are done for a particular purpose, and that is for the purpose of emphasis. The person speaking is calling your attention to what is being said. In other words, take note of this. Pay attention to what is being said. So the essence of repetition is what? Emphasis. Please take note of this. Okay, so I'll look at one more and then we'll call it a wrap. And this one will be imagery. Now, what is imagery? Imagery is the attempt by a writer to create a mental picture in the mind of the reader. Anything done that seeks to appeal to the sense organs in the creation of a mental picture by the writer for the reader is known as imagery. Now, you have 5 senses: the sense of smell, sound, sight, touch, and taste. These 5 sensory organs are actually considered when writers put pen to paper. The work comes alive when these sense organs are being appealed to or are being appeased. Now, imagery is very much heightened in works of poetry. You find imagery in other genres of literature, fine, but it is most heightened in poetry from what I've seen so far. I mean, imagery is all around us. One poem that for me exemplifies the use of imagery is A.R.D. Fairbairn's Rime of the Dead Self. This poem is awesome. You need to read this poem. It comes in 3 stanzas. So this poem starts by saying, tonight I have taken all that I was and strangled him pale, that lily white lad. I have choked him with these hands, these claws, catching him as he lay a dreaming on his bed. Let me stop there. Go ahead and read the poem. It's a fantastic piece. The imagery created for the reader in that poem is the imagery of someone committing murder. And actually, that is what does happen in that poem. This guy steps out of his body, looks at his body on the bed, and decides to strangle, to kill his former self. Whether he succeeds or not is left for you to find out. Rime of the Dead Self, A.R.D. Fairbairn. Another poem that also uses imagery will be Elizabeth Jennings' The Enemies. Now, that poem is very, very beautiful because it also comes in 3 stanzas, and it talks about the invasion, intrusion, dark invasion, intrusion of an unnamed people who come at night and are welcomed by women, and the men are nowhere to be found. But by daybreak, everyone is suspicious of everyone else. That poem is a very grim reminder of what happens when you have people migrating from one area into another area, and the host communities feel threatened with the coming of these new visitors. Okay, so we have looked at quite a number of literary devices in this video. I'm thinking of returning with one more installment for literary devices in my next video, where I would attempt to compare very, very confusing or often confused literary devices or figures of speech, as the case may be. I mean, you'll be quite surprised that some people can't make a clear-cut distinction between irony and sarcasm, metaphor, metonymy, synecdoche, and so on and so forth. So I'll try to return with one more installment, and then we'll call it a day with literary devices in that regard. I do hope you've learned something in my video. If you have questions and comments, you are free to leave them somewhere in the section below, and I'll get right to it. Like I did say, in literature, there are no final answers. It is actually subjective, but even in this subjectivity, we can still come to some level of compromise. Please like my video, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.